What's the dirtiest fine print you've seen in a contract? At one point in my career as a public school administrator for a large urban school district, a new superintendent was putting the district through the reorganization process that typically follows a change in leadership. At that time, the school district's 275 plus schools were organized under various sub-districts, and I was an administrator in one of those sub-districts. The superintendent of schools decided to do away with sub-districts, thereby deleting all of the positions in them. However, every affected employee was guaranteed continued employment in a position for which they were eligible if they would simply sign an agreement stating that they were resigning from their current position voluntarily. That seemed dastardly to me, because I intuitively understood that the reason for that voluntary resignation clause was an attempt by the school district to avoid having to pay for unemployment compensation. So I refused to sign the agreement. The day that the agreements were due to be signed and submitted with the deadline less than 2 hours away, I got a call from my immediate supervisor directing me to meet her right away in the office of the deputy superintendent, the highest level administrator below the superintendent of schools. As it turned out, I was the only employee in the school district who was going to miss the deadline for returning the signed agreement, and the deputy superintendent was determined to get me to either sign it or express understanding that I would be unemployed as of 5 p.m. that day. So she asked why I was refusing to sign. When I explained that the voluntary resignation clause was employed by the school district to avoid having to pay unemployment compensation, the deputy exclaimed, "Surely not. Let me call HR and ask." The person in HR verified what I had said, and the deputy stated that it was wrong of the district to do that. So we were at a moral impasse. I proposed the obvious solution: permit me to strike through that clause and replace it with "I do not voluntarily resign my employment." All agreed and were relieved that a crisis had been averted. The moral to this story is that there come times when we have to steadfastly claim, "This is wrong, and I will not stand for it." I stood my ground, and the system gave in. A friend had an idea she thought she should patent, and it seemed a good idea to a lot of people. But instead of getting her own patent, she contacted one of those companies that advertises for inventors. She soon brought me a 27-page contract of small print that she thought promised her legal assistance for the patent and all kinds of testing, design refinement, product development, manufacturing, advertising and promotion, and distribution of the product based on her design. This assistance only cost $12,000, but that was 20 years ago and they guaranteed success. What it didn't do was define success or any other term in the document, and on page 26, when you were brain dead from reading an infinity of detailed nonsense, it said the services and guarantees would be provided by third parties, unnamed third parties who weren't signing the contract anyway, so no one was guaranteeing anything. The contract also actually stated that she would have to do everything herself and that the company was responsible for nothing. She was so excited, she had been ready to sign and send her $12,000. I was in a writer's group and a member who had left the priesthood and was writing a book about it asked me to review his contract, this one 26 pages. The contract was similar to the one above. For $12,000 the company would provide an agent, an editor, printing, publication and distribution. Minimum sales of $50,000 were guaranteed if he, the author, complied with all requirements. Near the end was a paragraph stating again that sales of a minimum of $50,000 were guaranteed if he himself sold $50,000 worth of books. They recommended that he go around the country from small independent bookseller to bookseller and set up a website to sell it. Another friend asked me to read a lease before she signed. She was opening a restaurant, and the lease said she would be liable for the HVAC. I pointed out that tenants are responsible for utilities, but it is rare that they are responsible for any systems of the facility. That's the landlord's responsibility. Even most states' laws say so. I told her I suspected the HVAC system was undependable and she was being set up. And it was not reasonable in a 2-year lease for her to have to repair a major component/system of the building, anyway. She wanted this place so badly that she signed without even questioning it. Less than 6 months later, she had to replace the entire system, including replacing ductwork, damage in ceilings, and much more. Over $12,000, I don't remember exactly how much. A hard blow to a new business. And the repairman who pronounced the HVAC unit dead and impossible to resurrect told my friend it was ancient and said the owners had to know it was on its last legs for a long time. In a real estate closing, the mortgage document said, again near the end of an infinity of boring detail, that the buyer could not pay off the mortgage early. Not early like in less than 30 years. What? Even the other party's lawyer also had a fit about that. What's wrong is wrong. But the poor buyer had just come from 1,000 miles away with kids and the moving van idling in the parking lot. He wanted to sign it, even though he intended to move again in 2 or 3 years. It took both lawyers to convince him how dumb that would be. In business I have noticed no one reads contracts, leases, or other legal documents, and it often appears their lawyers don't either. It's so dangerous. We should read every mind-numbing line carefully. Or get our lawyers to. It would be a lot cheaper than a major misstep. This year I had my LASIK surgery done. Initially the price was going to be $3,000. $1,200 of that was going to give me a lifetime warranty in case I ever had any corrections that were needed on my eyes. Most people don't need corrections done, but it felt good to have that peace of mind that if they overcorrect my vision or if something goes bad a few years down the line, I'd be eligible. The fine print however said, to be eligible for subsequent corrective surgeries, participant must see optometrist every year after surgery. Now that might not sound like a huge deal. But it really is. It costs $100 a visit to the optometrist. It's a hassle driving and interrupting my day to go see these docs. The entire point of getting this surgery is so that I won't have to wear glasses/contact or see the eye doctor again. Now just imagine you got this surgery done. 7 out of the 8 years after the surgery, you saw an optometrist. Because you missed one of those visits, you are now no longer eligible for the corrective surgery you already paid for. I'm extremely happy with my LASIK results. But I'm glad I only paid the $1,800 and skipped the assurance plan. Life hack: assurance plans, and most added insurance plans, are a total ripoff. Kind of a different take on this. I worked for a company that produced an enormous multi-million-dollar software package for a certain industry. You've probably heard of some of our clients. Between configuration and coding changes, the system was heavily customized for each customer, and a new implementation typically took 18 to 24 months from the time work started until the product was live in the customer's environment. It wasn't uncommon for us to have hundreds of thousands of dollars in billing for this configuration and customization work, above and beyond the millions in licensing to use the product in the first place. Then my company was acquired by another one, and at some point, the new owner discovered our client-side software installer didn't contain an EULA, end-user license agreement. We had never bothered with one, because the people installing the software were not the executive-level signers of contracts, and the client-side software was useless without the server-side and database, and nobody ever received any of it without a signed contract anyway. This was unacceptable to new company leadership, and their legal department provided a standard boilerplate EULA that we were to insert in the installer immediately. They were very clear that we were not permitted to change so much as a single word. The EULA was to be displayed exactly as is. I complied, and inserted a screen in the installer displaying the EULA text exactly as received from new company's legal department. Buried in the fine print of their standard EULA was a phrase similar to, "If at any time you are not satisfied with this software, you may return it to the place of purchase for a full refund." I pointed this out to my manager, that we were offering a full refund on multi-million-dollar software if the customer is unsatisfied at any time for any reason. It went up the chain like a rocket. A few hours later an email came down from the VP level, stating that we were to remove that EULA immediately and not deliver it to any customer under any circumstances, and that he would personally address the issue with the legal department. We removed the EULA, and never heard another word about it. That was 10 plus years ago, and there still isn't an EULA delivered in that software today. My sister got a job with a popular makeup artist and brought me the contract agreement to go through for her, which was all shades ridiculous. I'll tell you why. First, that she would resume work at 8 am, not a minute more, every weekday and Saturday. If a client is assigned to her by her employer, she gets only 20% of the payment and 80% goes to her employer. If she brings the client herself, she gets 70% of the payment and her employer gets 30%. She would also mostly use her makeup products and none will be provided by the employer. Her income strictly is on the payment percentage she receives from the clients assigned to her or the ones she brings. She is not allowed to work for another prominent makeup artist 2 years after her termination from this job. And finally, if she breaks any rules set out in the contract, she can be terminated at any time and a suit may be initiated against her. NB She informed her employer that she was a student and so needs a flexible time to be more efficient because her school and workplace was a 45-minute drive. The employer declined. I read through this BS contract and told her to deny the job immediately because they're trying to enslave her. Edit, many people seem to assume this contract took place in the States. Lol, it took place once Nigeria, not the States.